Nadhim Zahawi, the former Chancellor of the UK and Tory party chairman, who recently was sacked from government here in the UK due to a tax issue or scandal. But the question is, what was the tax scandal all about? What did he actually do that had led to his sacking? Well, stay with me in this video. I'm going to unwrap this as simply as possible. And as you can see on screen, I actually did a poll on this particular question about Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs and asked you whether you understood it or not. At least 46% of you said, well, please do a video, Tony, and another 45% either had no idea or just vaguely understood what the tax issue was all about. So let's take it right from the beginning. In the year 2000, Nadhim Zahawi, along with another couple of co-founders, founded what's called YouGov, and you can see on screen, which is a British international internet-based market research and data analytics firm. And if I just scroll down, it clearly says the founders here, Nadhim Zahawi, Stephen Shakespeare, and I do believe there may be another. So back then in 2000, when the company was founded, it wasn't a PLC then, it was just a private limited company. And Nadhim Zahawi, as one of the co-founders, decided that he was going to put the shares of YouGov into an offshore family trust based in Gibraltar called Balshore Investments Limited. Now, according to my research on this, the offshore trust was actually owned by his parents, or shall I say, they were the beneficiaries of this particular trust. Now, let me tell you, there's nothing untoward about this particular setup. Certainly people who are in wealth actually have this kind of structure, and it is reasonably common. However, the complications probably would have arose if we fast forward to 2018. And apparently it's here where Zahawi, or shall we say the offshore trust, Balshore Investments Limited, sold the remainder of shares in YouGov. And because it's an offshore entity or trust, it would not have been subject to capital gains tax on that particular transaction because it's outside of the UK. So according to various sources, the estimated value of the sold shares in 2018 from a Balshore Investments Limited point of view was around about £20 million. Now, a key crucial piece of information in all of this is Nadhim Zahawi is actually UK tax resident, but he is non-domicile. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means if there's any capital transactions, i.e. he makes gains on the sale of shares overseas, not in the UK, so long as he does not remit it back to the UK, then actually it is out of scope in terms of capital gains tax. So the crux of the situation, in my view, is then what happened, all the proceeds and gains of the sale of those shares is sitting in Balshore Investments Limited, this offshore family trust in Gibraltar. Nadhim Zahawi and his spouse apparently paid themselves from that offshore trust, from that entity in Gibraltar, themselves interest-free loans, matching the amounts of proceeds that came into the company for that particular transaction. And the likelihood is they would have remitted those loans back to themselves here in the UK, supposedly cash. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the actual beneficiaries of this offshore family trust were in fact Zahawi's parents, more specifically perhaps his father. So therefore, these interest-free loans coming back to Zahawi and his spouse are suggesting otherwise. Think about it from HMRC's point of view if they're looking into this. So therefore, the chances are, and I'm speculating here, I can't say this for a fact, HMRC have probably challenged Zahawi on the fact that this is a capital distribution, that is a capital gain in the hands of Zahawi and not a loan. And that is where the actual liability to pay capital gains tax has probably arisen. And it's estimated to be around about £4 million. And furthermore, as you can see on screen, according to Tax Policy Associates, this is a publication or a website run by one Dan Neal. Now, Dan is a tax lawyer or barrister, I believe, and he was the one that led the drive to the investigation into Mr. Zahawi's affairs. And what Dan has actually said here on the 17th of July, according to some further analysis and apparently an error that was made, documents disclose that a £99,000 dividend from Balshore was redirected to Zahawi. Now, if that is the case, then actually Zahawi was not apparently the beneficiary or shareholder of YouGov, so therefore why is he getting these dividends? That implicates him even further. Furthermore, and allegedly, none of this was actually declared on Mr. Zahawi's self-assessment return for the period in question, whether it's for capital gains tax, whether it's for dividends that he may have received. So therefore, I'm just assuming that Mr. Zahawi probably thought that, none of this came in scope for UK taxes, so therefore he didn't have to make a declaration. But actually, as a UK resident, you have to make declarations, even if sometimes you don't have to pay the tax. So therefore, he was probably not advised very well in that respect, and HMRC obviously put it down to a careless error as opposed to a deliberate error. Now, that's another debate for another time, but the fact of the matter is his penalties were actually based on the fact that he was careless and not deliberate. So all of this has culminated in Mr. Zahawi being sacked eventually by Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, from the cabinet, i.e. from government, although I do understand he's still going to be serving as an MP for his constituency due to the fact that he breached the ministerial code, which actually necessitated him in declaring his tax affairs, or shall we say the investigation that was going on into his tax affairs at the relevant point in time, apparently something he did not do. So in conclusion, and I guess the moral of the story is Mr. Zahawi set this particular structure up and probably was advised to do so on the basis that he achieves tax avoidance. Now, in itself, I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as it's on the right side of tax avoidance. And, you know, it is a very blurry line. But obviously in this instance, what's happened is he's overstepped the mark, and tax avoidance has, I wouldn't say become tax evasion, but certainly aggressive tax avoidance that has been caught by anti-avoidance rules here in the UK. Hopefully this video has given you a succinct and reasonable sort of insight into what actually happened with Mr. Zahawi's tax affairs, but I'd be interested in hearing your comments in the boxes below and whether you have your own thoughts, opinions, or certain facts that you know of with regards to this whole episode that perhaps I have missed. Be interesting to get into a conversation with you, and believe me, if it's a constructive comment, I will be replying. Until the next video, take care.